Conventional agriculture, the world's bread and butter, which it really is. Conventional agriculture does feed the world, but there are a lot of issues that come along with that. One issue that the world is facing right now is overpopulation. There are too many people, the world cannot sustain our current population, and the population is increasing at an inclining rate. This means a lack of resources, of water, land, crops, and animals, and increased consumption of pesticides, machinery, and the food itself. When this happens, developing countries feel the shock first, so first world countries such as Canada, America, and Australia dump food and resources into developing countries that are starving. What does this create? A gap between the poor and the rich. While sometimes alleviating hunger in the short run, these programs usually lower the price at which third world farmers can sell their crops due to the equilibrium price being forced down because of easy access in the market. This depresses local food production and makes it harder for poor countries to feed themselves in the long run. This is a great example of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. There are also environmental issues that come along with the conventional agriculture problem. The first being water quantity. Agriculture is both a victim and a cause of water scarcity. Not the use of water, but the way in people use water. Agriculture accounts for the majority of human water use. There is just 3% of water on our globe that is fresh water, and 70% of that fresh water is used for agriculture. Because we are using water at a much faster rate than it is renewing, our underground water sources are quickly running dry. 21 of the 37 major aquifers in the world are receding. Wells are running dry, and the water table is dropping all over the world. With an increasing population, water demand is projected to increase 55% from where it was at 2000 by 2050. There just simply won't be enough. Irrigation is the process by which farmers water their agriculture, and many irrigation systems are not as efficient as they should be. They don't use the water resources that they have as adequately as they should. On the flip side, we need agriculture for survival, and water is essential in maintaining adequate food supply. More water creates more food, which in turn creates more money for the country selling the food. Water is also, arguably, a renewable resource. Although it is not renewing as fast as we hope it would be, there are theories that there will always be another aquifer, another lake, or another river to draw on in the meantime of the replenishing. However, in the words of the senior water scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Jay Fairmagletti, there is not an infinite supply of water. So what can we do? Rain-fed agriculture. The most common method of agriculture in developing nations is rain-fed. And rainwater harvesting is on the rise for first world countries. It provides clean water for plants and animals at a low cost. Having this water helps to increase the number and quality of the crops grown. Irrigation management is another solution. Many of the irrigation systems around the globe are not as efficient as they could be, but irrigation management aims to control the volume and frequency of irrigated water applied to crops so as to meet crop needs while conserving water resources. Another issue is water quality. Conventional agriculture often results in a low water quality. Runoff of pesticides, fertilizers, and manure discharge to water bodies eventually find their way back into our lakes, rivers, or ocean. Salinization and waterlogging. When the soil is saturated with water, the airface is restricted and the soil becomes waterlogged. Waterlogged soils prevent leaching of salts imported by the irrigated water, which result in salinization. The salt deposits can be flushed away with added fresh water, but at a significant cost. Soil leaching is a natural process, but when dramatically increased through irrigation, it can have negative effects. Too much leaching results in the removal of too much nitrate from the soil, and it becomes overacidic. Many nutrients can leach, such as sulfur, phosphorus, and others. Eutrophication also occurs when the clearing of land and building of towns and cities and farms. Land runoff is accelerated. More nutrients, such as phosphates and nitrates, are supplied to lakes and rivers. Extra nutrients are also supplied by treatment plants, golf courses, fertilizers, farms, and toxic animal waste. Waterlogging and salinization are not a problem for rain-fed crops because salts are naturally flushed away. Collecting rain in rain barrels is starting to become a more common method of watering crops. Although it is not possible for every crop to be watered by the rain, rain-fed agriculture is the #1 way to maintain water quality. Flushing the soils with pure water is the best way to approach soil reclamation. However, this is expensive and sufficient water is required. Increased knowledge and policy so that conventional farmers are required to carefully manage their irrigation, conduct annual soil tests to plan fertilization strategies, and take other steps to reduce the poor water quality resulting through agriculture is a great way to provide a solution to the problem of water quality. Pesticides. Pesticides increase crop yield significantly. Since the Green Revolution, fertilizers have exploded, and Norman Borlaug, the father of the revolution, vastly expanded food production. Pesticides increase yields by reducing the blemishes on crops, thus a greater portion. They also, as the nature of their job is, prevent pests and other invasive species from damaging the crops. This ensures that quality crops are grown every time, which is economically and environmentally beneficial. However, pesticides do wash into waterways, pollute the water, and in large quantities can kill aquatic life. They can also poison wildlife on land, which interferes with the ecosystem. Debatably, pesticides can also have negative effects on human health. A way forward? Well, pesticides are necessary. So, the best way forward is policies for less harmful pesticides for humans, animals, crops, and water. Another problem is invasive species. Invasive species are plants, animals, and microorganisms in an area where they have never been before. They can adapt, spread quickly, and don't have natural predators in the new environment. These species can invade agricultural and farmed areas, causing serious damage to a nation's economy and environment. They have also become a bigger concern in recent years as worldwide trade and travel have increased the risk of spreading these species. They can either be imported from other countries or spread between different areas within a nation. Some invasive species, however, can have a positive effect on the environment and can be introduced for very specific purposes or reasons, such as the honeybee. It can give specific ecological advances, although it is not native to the environment. However, there can be many negative impacts, the first being loss of habitat entirely, or alteration of habitat. Another being economic costs. It can cost up to $500 million annually to remove zebra mussels from the Great Lakes, and other invasive species also cost a lot, which can have enormous impacts on a nation. As well as health impacts. Invasive species can impact human health. For instance, the zebra mussels accumulate toxins in their tissues like PCBs and PAHs. When other organisms prey on these mussels, these toxins are passed up the food chain and can also enter animals consumed by humans. A way forward? Don't release your pets. That disrupts local food webs and causes algal growth. Drain all the water from kayaks, boats, and paddle or scuba equipment so not to transfer it to a new environment. Or join removal efforts. There are lots of efforts around the world attempting to remove invasive species from places they don't belong. Another problem? Biodiversity, or lack of, monoculture. Within a large portion of conventional farming, biodiversity is obsolete and monoculture practices are instituted. Monoculture is easier to farm because farmers can focus on only one type of practice. They also produce bigger yields because there are larger and more concentrated quantities of certain crops. They can control many of the undesirable organisms and farm in a way that prevents them. Additionally, there is a lot more profit involved because of the average variable costs are minimized due to the lack of variety in the need of agricultural supplies. But there are negative effects. Parasites, for instance. If a parasite attacks the field, then every crop is destroyed. Or pesticides. Having eliminated the natural checks and balances that a diverse ecosystem provides, monoculture production has to find ways to replicate some of them in order to protect the crops. This means the use of large quantities of pesticides. And they change the organism resistance. Nature is adaptable. Organisms evolve resistance to these pesticides, insecticides, and herbicides, so farmers have to use more and more chemicals are being applied to monoculture crops. In turn, this affects the natural ecosystems detrimentally. Soil degradation is another issue. Because the negative impact the overuse of chemical fertilizers has on the soil, monocultures are also detrimental to soil health in other ways. Ground cover crops are eliminated, meaning there is no natural protection for the soil from erosion by wind and rain. Also, no plants provide leaf litter mulch to replenish the topsoil. All of this combines to continually degrade the soil, often meaning that it becomes unusable for agriculture. A way forward? Crop rotation. Many farmers choose to rotate the crops that they grow. This is to break pest life cycles. However, some crops do not work well in a rotating environment, and it can be costly to the farmers. Polyculture. Going back to planting more than one crop in a given space. There's a solution for monoculture. Or none. I suppose one could argue that Michael Pollan is correct when he says monoculture is at the root of virtually every problem that bedevils the modern farmer. However, that's only because monoculture is how modern farmers grow their crops. If they grew their crops polyculturally, a new set of equally bad problems would arise, and then polyculture would be the root of virtually every problem farmers faced. Are monocultures problematic? Sure, if the geographic or temporal scale is large enough, but the problems solved by using monoculture on a field scale tend to far outweigh the problems that they cause. Another problem is deforestation. Agriculture is the direct driver of roughly 80% of tropical deforestation. Deforestation creates room for people to farm. When more land is cleared, more land is available. At the same time, a decreasing amount of trees means less oxygen in the atmosphere. There is a scientific opinion which preaches that because there is such a large volume of oxygen on the earth, we needn't worry about deforestation as it puts such a small dent into the oxygen level. But I'm not willing to take the risk. Even if oxygen was not a concern, there are many other effects of deforestation we ought not to take lightly. Another atmospheric effect is that trees absorb CO2, a greenhouse gas that warms the earth. If we cut down too many trees and then burn them, an influx of CO2 is released and not reabsorbed by pre-existing trees, which induces climate change. Thinking back to plant transpiration, we know that trees perpetuate the water cycle by returning water vapor to the atmosphere. Without trees, the water cycle is interrupted. Deforestation also destroys the habitat of many of the creatures on the earth, which interfere with the ecosystem. Many species are going extinct due to deforestation. A way forward: eat sustainable food and make food choices that are less impactful on the environment. Eat less meat. Government should institute policies to diminish deforestation as well. You could also encourage the planting of new trees where the old ones were cut down. Another solution is vertical farming, or farming skyscrapers, which takes a lot less room than horizontal farming. Another impact: climate change. Agriculture is a focus of climate change for both cause and effect. It is largely due to the release of carbon from agriculture, but in turn affects agricultural growth in both plants and animals. Climate change has been known to have certain positive effects on the world in agriculture, however. Specifically, fewer winter deaths due to warmer temperatures. The commercial benefits of accessing the Arctic Passage without year-round ice would provide easier transportation of goods, including food, the potential for farming in colder and more mountainous regions, and greener rainforests result in enhanced plant growth. On the contrary, there are also some negative effects. Firstly, disrupted water supply, which was mentioned previously. Secondly, we have seen an influx of wildfires that destroy agriculture, which many say are an effect of a warmer climate. Many equatorial and warm places on the globe will be at higher risk for drought and facing crop failure due to the warmer temperatures, and the sea level rise will result in less land or less space for agriculture. There are many other negative causes and effects associated with climate change due to agriculture, many of which we have already been talked about, or are an aspect of many of the environmental issues we have already talked about. A way forward: save trees. Another proposed change is the adoption of no-till farming that involves leaving unharvested crop stalks and other plant matter behind in the field undisturbed by plows and other soil agitation instruments, as anything that reduces soil disturbance increases carbon storage. Growing crops for fuel, biofuels, is another way of cutting greenhouse gases by replacing fossil fuels, which has a direct relation to slowing climate change. Another issue: mining. Modern agriculture depends upon mined products used in crop fertilizers and animal feed supplements. Plants rely on 3 essential nutrients: nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. While nitrogen is renewable and can be captured from the air, potassium and phosphorus are mined and applied through fertilizer, where they are not present in adequate quantities in the soil. Phosphorus is also mined and used not only in fertilizer, but also as a supplement in animal feed. Other mined supplements used in livestock and poultry feeds includes selenium and zinc. Mining also competes with agriculture for land space. This is a struggle in developing countries where subsistence farmers are displaced by mining projects. Mining also uses large amounts of water, and that water, as mentioned previously, is a diminishing resource. Additionally, it often pollutes the water and always destroys the existing ecosystem. A way forward: many people are lobbying for mining to be more extensively government regulated and planned. This will provide for accountability within the mining industry. Another environmental issue: energy. The Washington Post article points out the critical reality that, according to some estimates, farming accounts for only 35% of the energy embedded in food, while the other 65% goes to transportation, cooking, and disposal of waste. With conventional crops needing an increased amount of nitrogen-based fertilizers and pesticides, the energy consumption is 17,372 megajoules, which was 70% more than organic crops. What accounts for this increased energy? The manufacture and transport of synthetic nitrogen, with which they pound their plots, requires a tremendous amount of oil. When oil and fossil fuels are extracted from the earth, there are many environmental issues that follow. Firstly, the existing ecosystem is destroyed where they are drilling. Secondly, the burning and use of fossil fuels releases a huge amount of carbon into the atmosphere. And thirdly, the earth is not a black hole of infinite resources, but rather a finite world with a limited amount. When fossil fuels and oil have been totally spent up, we will have to rely on other forms of energy. A way forward: organic farming is really the most positive step forward when it comes to energy usage. To farm 1 hectare of corn, it takes 71% less energy in organic farming due to the nitrogen coming from less energy extensive resources, such as composted manure of fair and beef cattle. Conventional agriculture is truly the bread and butter of the world, as it feeds the growing population at increasing rates of production. As outlined in this presentation, however, not all of the effects of conventional agriculture are beneficial to the flourishing of the earth. What steps can you take? Join an environmental movement, eat sustainable food, and most importantly, reduce your meat consumption, as meat is a huge consumer of agriculture. What can the farmers do? Educate themselves. What are the environmental impacts that they are making, and how can they make little steps to accomplish a more peaceful and thriving Earth?